Hey, shalom, shalom from your Dutch Uncle John, here to tell you what it is in the Two Witnesses Part 2. You know, in the first part, we showed you who I believe are the two witnesses, Moses and Elijah. They represent the law and the prophets. And I encourage you to go and look at Part 1 to see the evidence as to why I think those are the two witnesses. But in Revelation, it talks about these two witnesses, in Revelation 11, that they're going to come to Jerusalem for 3 years, 3.5 years, and be preaching. This is during the tribulation period. And Antichrist is not going to like this, right? He's going to put a stop to it. And where are they going to prophesy? I assume it will be at the Temple Mount, or probably up on top of the Temple Mount. If you've ever been to Jerusalem and you've gone up there, you know, the Muslims won't let you even pray. If they see your lips moving, I mean, you're not saying anything, they will come over and stop you. So how crazy is it that you can't pray on the Temple Mount where God's house is? So you can imagine if there's two guys up there preaching the blood of Yeshua. That is going to drive people crazy. But nevertheless, that's what's going to happen. So here is the Temple Mount. You can see down below is where the Jews do their prayer, okay, against the western wall, or they call it the Kotel. Up on top, you have two buildings. You have the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and you have the Dome of the Rock. And here's a picture of the Hakotel Hama'arvi. Remember, I don't speak, understand, or know, or read Hebrew. So my pronunciations can be bad, sorry. But it's the content, the meat we've got. Okay? So here's the Western Wall where you see the Jews get to pray. This is the second closest place to the actual spot where the temple sat, or that they believe. The closest place is there a tunnel that goes through. You can see that little domed entranceway there at the end of the picture. If you go into there, it leads into tunnels that you can get to a place where you are very close to where God's temple was. A lot of Jews are afraid to go up on the Temple Mount, because if you're not a priest, you're not allowed to go into the temple. I mean, even though there's no temple there, they don't even want to step on the ground where the temple was. And especially the Holy of Holies, where only the high priest was allowed to go once a year. Again, they don't know exactly where that was, but they're not taking any chances, so they won't even go up there lest they would step on that spot. Okay? Here's more pictures of this. You can see here it's divided. The men are on the left side, and then there's a wall, and the women go on the right side. And you can, on the very far right, you can see some wooden things. That is a bridge that takes you up to the Temple Mount. All right, so in Revelation 11, verse 4, this is from the part 1, it said that these are the two olive trees and the two lampstands that stand before the Lord of all the earth. Okay, if you go back to the Old Testament, remember, God says, on the account of 2 or 3 witnesses, a matter is established. And everywhere in the Bible, if it has something, there'll be another place in the Bible that reconfirms that something. He's got 2 witnesses written for everything. You understand? Very cool. Okay, so let's look at Zechariah chapter 4, because here he's prophesying about 2 witnesses coming. It says, "Then the angel who was speaking with me returned and woke me, as a man is awakened from sleep. 'What do you see?' he asked. 'I see a solid gold lampstand,' I replied, 'with a bowl at the top, and 7 lamps on it, with 7 spouts to the lamps. There are also 2 olive trees beside it.'" Okay, So the prophet who wrote this is Zechariah. Let's remember Zechariah, okay? Well, it ends in Yah, Zechariah, so there's Yahweh, okay? And the first part is Zakar. And do you remember what Zakar means? Zakar means remember, okay? And so Zechariah is Yahweh has remembered. Very nice, okay? We've seen this way back in Exodus chapter 20, verse 8. This is the fourth commandment. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. There you have, that verse starts with Zakar. You see it? And in Deuteronomy, by the way, it relists the Ten Commandments. And in Deuteronomy, it says, observe the Sabbath. Just so you know, there's two listings of the Ten Commandments. One of them says, remember it, and one of them says, observe it. That's a difference in those two. Very interesting. So, remember, Zakar. Got it? So, I have trouble remembering things like that. No, really. I have the memory of an elephant. In fact, yeah, I went to Africa once and I saw an elephant. Yeah, I have a memory of an elephant. Okay, so Zechariah, what about him? He was prophesying from the Promised Land about 520 BC. Okay, and he refers to Messiah by some very common names that we know the Messiah to be referred to. He refers to him as the servant. He refers to Messiah as the branch. He refers to Messiah as the stone. And he was ministering to those Jews who returned from Babylon. Remember, Nebuchadnezzar took them to Babylon, and they were there for a while, and then they went to Persia, because Persia invaded Babylon, and then after 70 years, they were permitted to come back to Jerusalem. And that was the 70 years of punishment, because they had not kept Sabbath for a whole long time. And God said, this land needs to rest, and it sends them into captivity. And when they came back, Zechariah was there ministering to them. Okay, so I'll give you a timeline of when he did his things. And Zechariah, before we get into his two witnesses stuff, I want to show you some of the things that he prophesied, because this is a very short book, minor prophet there, but he covered a lot. Look at Zechariah 9:9. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, thy king cometh unto thee. He is just and having salvation, lowly and riding upon an ass, and upon a colt, the foal of an ass. I mean, what a thing to prophesy, that the Messiah, the Savior of the world, is going to enter Jerusalem on the back of a donkey. What a weird thing to prophesy, that would be part of Yeshua's triumphant entry. But, sure enough, in the New Testament, when Jesus entered Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, he came in riding a donkey, and they were throwing the palm branches down in front of him. And John 12:15 references that. Fear not, daughter of Zion, behold, thy king cometh, and sitting on an ass's colt. So, it was prophesied, and it was fulfilled. Yeshua's price was prophesied by Zechariah in chapter 11, verses 12 starting. And I said unto them, if you think good, give me my price, and if not, forbear. So they weighed for my price 30 pieces of silver. And Yahweh said unto me, cast it unto the potter, a goodly price that I was priced at of them. And I took the 30 pieces of silver and cast them to the potter in the house of Yahweh. So he's prophesying that Yeshua is going to be, the Messiah is going to be sold for 30 pieces of silver. And sure enough, he was. We can see the fulfillment of that in Mark 27, starting in verse 9. Then was fulfilled that which was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, And they took 30 pieces of silver, the price of him that was valued, whom they of the children of Israel did value, and gave them for the potter's field, as the Lord appointed me. I want to point out something here where it says, then was fulfilled that which was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet. We're talking about Zechariah. Why did he say it was spoken of by Jeremiah? Well, I think Jeremiah spoke it and Zechariah wrote it. And Jeremiah was quoting Zechariah. Make sense? Because it says here that that which was fulfilled spoken by Jeremiah the prophet. Well, Zechariah wrote it. Yeah, he wrote it. Jeremiah spoke it. Okay? Yeshua's crucifixion was prophesied in Zechariah 12:10. And I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and of supplications. And they shall look upon me whom they have pierced. And they shall mourn for him as one mourns for his only son. And shall be in bitterness for him as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn. So it's talking about being pierced. Remember, Yeshua's side was pierced when he was on the cross and blood and water came out. And they shall mourn for as one mourns for his only son. And Yeshua is the begotten Son of God. So crucifixion, and we see in John 19:37, and again another scripture said, they shall look on him whom they pierced. You know, this New Testament is quoting Old Testament. We've just seen 3 verses that did this, right? Zechariah prophesied it, and then the New Testament, the Brit Hadashah in Hebrew, they are referencing these Old Testament prophecies that Jesus is fulfilling. Yeshua's betrayal was prophesied in Zechariah 13:7. Awake, O sword, against my shepherd, and against the men that is my fellow, saith Yahweh of hosts. Smite the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered, and I will turn mine hand upon the little ones. So it prophesies that they're going to turn against Messiah. And in Mark 14:27, and Jesus said to them, all of you shall be offended because of me this night, for it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. And what happened? After Yeshua is crucified, the Jews are scattered all over the world 30-some years later by the Romans. Okay? Which, by the way, that is God's plan. Right? That the Messiah will be rejected by the chosen people, and then they will be scattered, and when they're scattered, they will take God's word with them all over the world. Everybody knows the God of Israel and Jesus. They don't know him personally, everyone, but you understand, at least you heard of Jesus. Nobody knows the God of Peru, or the God of Bolivia, or the God of wherever. Okay? And another prophecy that he's saying here is in Zechariah 13 is that Yeshua's brothers will be scattered. And they were scattered. Look in Mark 14 again. I will smite the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. So there's actually 2 prophecies in there. That he will be betrayed and that the Jews will be scattered. And they were scattered. I like this one. Zechariah 12 verse 1 through 3. That Jerusalem will become a cup of drunkenness and a heavy stone for all peoples. Verse 1, thus declares Yahweh, who stretches out the heavens and lays the foundation of the earth, who forms the spirit of man within him. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of drunkenness to all the surrounding peoples. Judah will be besieged as well as Jerusalem. On that day, when all the nations of the earth gather against her, I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who would heave it away will be severely injured. Wow, that is a very cool prophecy, because Jerusalem, it is always in the news that somebody's trying to do this or trying to do that or trying to make peace. And anybody who gets their fingers into Jerusalem, they're going to be hurt, right? Jerusalem is a heavy stone, and you will be injured, severely injured, if you get involved in that. So keep that in mind. And people are acting like they're drunk, crazy. They make crazy decisions according to Jerusalem. Zechariah 14, starting in verse 2, he's prophesying Armageddon. By the way, Armageddon is the Hebrew Har. Har means mountain, and Megiddo is the valley there. So Har Megiddo is the mountain of Megiddo. That's where this word comes from. Starting in verse 2, for I will gather all the nations to battle against Jerusalem. The city shall be taken, the houses rifled, and the women ravished. Half of the city shall go into captivity, but the remnant of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then the Lord will go forth and fight against those nations as he fights in the day of battle. Very neat. That reference of fighting in the day of battle, that's back in Gideon's time. They made a reference to that. I encourage you to go back to Judges and take a look at that. But notice it says all the nations. And you know, the United States, where I'm from, was like best friends with Israel. And now you got a weak president, and I don't know when you're watching this. Hopefully he won't be president soon. But Mr. Biden, he puts his hand out to shake, but on the other hand, he's got a knife that he's going to put in Israel's back. You got to stop doing this, or we're going to stop giving you weapons. And you got to do this, or we're going to not give you that. It's just evil. You know, it said, God will bless those who bless Israel, and those who curse will be cursed. And the United States will turn against Israel. You can see it in the news today, since Hamas has attacked Israel, and now Israel is going into Gaza and trying to clean things up and get rid of Hamas, eliminate, destroy Hamas. And you got the whole world protesting, Israel, ceasefire, we need ceasefire. They're turning against Israel. And it's not that they're against Israel, and it's not even that they're against Jews. You know, if you really go to the root of the problem, they are against God, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. So just know, if you say, oh, well, I'm anti-Zionist. No, that's code speak for I'm against Jews and I'm against their God. That's the bottom line. So there. Okay. Here's one. Zechariah 14, 12. Look at this prophecy. And this shall be the plague with which Yahweh will strike all the people who fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall dissolve while they stand on their feet. Their eyes shall dissolve in their sockets, and their tongues shall dissolve in their mouth. Imagine, how does your body just dissolve while you're still standing? I think this has a prophetic picture. There's something nuclear, and that, I believe, is coming. Okay? And how did Zechariah know 2,500 years ago? How can he predict that your eye sockets and your tongue will just melt away? You know, what kind of weapon was he visualizing? Whatever it was, we got those weapons now. Amazing. So, here's a little recap of Zechariah's greatest hits. Triumphal entry, Yeshua's price, the crucifixion, his betrayal, his brothers scattered, and then Jerusalem will become a heavy stone, Armageddon, nuclear war, all prophesied in this tiny little book. All right? So, keep that in mind as we read about the two witnesses that Zechariah is prophesying about. We're going to look in Zechariah chapter 6, starting in verse 9. The word of Yahweh also came to me, saying, also take, now this gets a little complicated or a little deep, but that's good, we need deep. Also take silver and gold, and make an ornate crown, and set it on the head of Joshua, the son of Jehozadak, the high priest. By the way, Jehozadak is not the high priest. Joshua is the high priest. He's the son of Jehozadak, but he's the high priest, Joshua. Then say to him, the Yahweh of armies says this, behold, there is a man whose name is Branch, for he will branch out from where he is, and he will build the temple of the Lord. Yes, it is he who will build the temple of the Lord, and he who will bear the majesty and sit and rule on his throne. So he will be a priest on his throne, and the council of peace will be between the two offices. Wow, lots to talk about here. Okay, we're going to go through each of those verses and just tear them apart. Let's start out here. Notice there's crowns involved, and that's kind of a Christ-centered symbolism. There's lots of symbolism with Jesus and crowns. Okay, it starts out with saying that the word of the Lord came to me saying, so we know it's where it's from. Okay, and where do we see crowns in the Bible? Let's look at John 19:2. And the soldiers twisted a crown of thorns and put it on Yeshua's head. So there's a crown that Yeshua wore. Look in Hebrews 2:9. But we see Yeshua, who was made a little lower than the angels for the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor. So we have more crowns associated with Yeshua. Revelation 19:12. His eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns. So Yeshua is associated with crowns. And in this scripture that we're reading, look, it says, take the silver and gold, make an ornate crown, and set it on the head of Joshua, the son of Jehozadak, the high priest. That name, Joshua, that is Yeshua. That's the high priest at this time when the Jews had returned from Persia and they're going to rebuild the temple. The high priest's name was Joshua. And we know Yeshua, Jesus, he is our eternal high priest, right? So there's a tie-in with crowns, the same name. And if we look in verse 11, it mentions Joshua's name, Yehoshua. And if we look in the New Testament, Yeshua's name, Jesus, it's spelled very similar. In fact, the other Joshua, the one that followed Moses, there is a verse in Nehemiah where his name is spelled exactly the same as Jesus. And oh my, I've got a really good video that I need to film someday about the parallels between the book of Joshua and the book of Revelation, because it's just incredible. We'll put that on the to-do list. Okay, so we have Joshua and Yeshua having the same name. And look in Matthew 1:21. This is when Jesus is born, or the prophecy of his birth. It says, she will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins. By the way, this is the English translation. And although I was raised saying Jesus, but his name is Yeshua. This verse actually makes no sense. You know, we're going to call his name Jesus because he will save his people from their sins. Jesus and saving people from sin are not at all related. But if you refer to it as you are to give him the name Yeshua, Yeshua is the Hebrew word for salvation. Now that makes sense, right? You were to call him Yeshua because he will save. You were to call his name salvation because he will save his people from their sins. That's a nice point. And I think more people in the world would get it if we stopped calling him Jesus, which is an anglicized, or I don't know where it came from, Greek. No, Greek is Eusus, but his Hebrew name, and he's Jewish. Jesus, Yeshua, is Jewish. I hope you know that. I meet a lot of people around the world, and that comes as a shock to them. What? What? All right. So, Jesus or Yeshua, this is from Strong's Concordance. It's the same name. It's the name of the Messiah. So it's interesting that this high priest that we're hearing about in Zechariah has the same name as Jesus. Okay? Let's go on. And set it on the head of Joshua, the son of Jehozadak, the high priest. Okay, this high priest is the HaKohen HaGadol. HaKohen, the hey in front is the priest, is Cohen, and HaGadol is high, okay? So that you'll hear that a lot. He is the high priest during this time, Joshua. And we know that in the New Testament, the Brit Hadashah, Hebrews 5, starting in verse 5, so also Christ did not glorify himself to become high priest, but it was he who said to him, "You are my son, today I have begotten you." As he also says in another place, "You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek." So Jesus, Yeshua, is the high priest forever. Got it? So there's another parallel between those two Joshuas. In Psalm 110:4, the Lord has sworn and will not relent. You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. That's what Hebrews was quoting, the last verse we read. Another point, that this Messiah is going to be a priest forever. Hebrews 7:17, for it is attested of him, Yeshua, you are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. Notice they're quoting Psalm 110 in the New Testament. Very cool. By the way, you know, Jesus, Yeshua, not only is he going to be priest, he's also going to be king. Okay? And I don't know if you know this, but in Hebrew, or in the Jewishness of the Bible, the kings are all going to come from the tribe of Judah. The priests will all come from the tribe of Levi. And how can Jesus be priest and king? You can't come from two different fathers, you understand? And the way around this, because this is people get stumped by this, Jesus is in the line of Judah through David. So he can qualify to be king. How does he qualify to be priest? Because he's not coming through the line of Levi, he's coming through a much older priestly line. Remember when Abraham met Melchizedek, and this is Abraham, this is way, way back. This is a priest far greater, in a greater priesthood than the earthly priesthood of Levi. So that's how Jesus qualifies to be our high priest. He's not coming from the Levitical line, he's coming from the Melchizedek line, a much greater priestly line. So he can qualify to be king and priest. And by the way, since we're here, Yeshua is also prophet. You know, when the wise men brought gifts to Yeshua when he was born, they brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Why did they bring gold? Because this baby is going to be king, and that's what you give a king. And why did they bring frankincense? Because that was one of the incenses that you used to burn in the altar of incense in the temple. That's what the priests use, the incense. So by giving him frankincense, it was saying, you're going to be priest. And why did they give him myrrh? Myrrh was used to embalm a body. And Yeshua prophesied his death, burial, and resurrection, showing his prophet status. So those three gifts that were brought were extremely relevant for those three gifts. Okay? So we have the high priest, Joshua in Zechariah and Yeshua in the New Testament, both high priests. Okay, down to verse 12. Then say to him, the Lord of armies says this, behold, there is a man whose name is Branch, for he will branch out from where he is and build the temple of the Lord. Okay, we're going to look here at the word man. Notice Luke 2:7. And she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. And she wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. What's the point here of that verse? Why am I showing you that? Because Zechariah said, behold, there is a man whose name is Branch. If you're a man, you're going to be born. And it's letting you know that this Messiah is being born. We know he was born of a virgin, right? In John 19:5, then Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. And Pilate said to them, behold the man. Again, Jesus is a man. 1 Timothy 2:5, for there is one God and one mediator between God and men, the man, Christ Jesus. By the way, for those who don't know, Christ is the Greek word for anointed one, we say in English, but there's a word for that in Hebrew. It's Moshiach, which is Messiah. Whenever you say Jesus Christ, what you're saying is Yeshua is Messiah. Interesting. I have Jewish friends who, when they're hammering and they hit their thumb and they say, Jesus Christ. They're saying, Yeshua is Mashiach. They don't realize that. They say they don't believe in Jesus, yet they call him Messiah when they hit their thumb. Okay, so both of these guys are men. Okay? They have, the chromosome thing, right? If you XX, you're female. XY, you're male. YYY, Delilah. Okay, next it says, behold, there is a man whose name is Branch, for he will branch out from where he is. The Hebrew word for branch in this verse is semak, and it means a sprout of a branch. So he's calling this person, the branch, semak. We see that again in Isaiah 11:1, where there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. And in Isaiah 11, Isaiah uses the word netzer. So what's this all about? All right, how does that apply? Here's how it applies. Look at Matthew 2:23. And he came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophets, he shall be called a Nazarene. Nazareth in Hebrew is Netzeret. Netzer is branch. So Nazareth is branch town, and Yeshua is from branch town. That's why he's called the branch. Okay, that's the tie-in there. Joshua the high priest, I don't know a tie-in for him as branch. What else does it say in verse 12? For he will branch out from where he is, and he will build the temple of the Lord. In John 2 in the New Testament, starting in verse 19, Yeshua answered and said to them, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. Then the Jews said, it has taken 46 years to build this temple, and will you raise it up in 3 days? But he was speaking of the temple of his body. Therefore, when he had risen from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this to them, and they believed the scriptures and the word which Jesus had said. When he says he's going to destroy the temple and rebuild it, his body is the temple of God, just like our bodies are the temple of God. You understand? And Jesus, it will be destroyed, and 3 days later he's going to build it back. He's going to raise from the dead. Nice picture. By the way, that whole picture, if you go back to Moses on Mount Sinai and the bush that's burning, and Moses goes up to check out why, there's fire, fire, fire. That's judgment. God is a perfect judge, and he has to judge. But he also loves you, and he has mercy. And that bush did not burn up. There's the mercy. So God, who's a roaring fire, he wants to live inside of each of us. But he doesn't have to burn us up. You understand? And it was a thorn bush. Where did we first see those? Remember the penalty for Adam sinning back in the garden is he was going to have to work the ground, and the ground would bring forth thorns and thistles. Thorns represent sin. That picture of the burning bush up on Mount Sinai, that was a picture of us. We are full of sin, and God's judgment's going to rain down, but he doesn't have to burn us up. Beautiful picture. Okay, so it talks about building the temple. Joshua is going to do it in the Old Testament, Joshua the high priest, and Yeshua did it. He did it once with his body, and he's going to also build the millennial temple in the end of days. And notice that, look at the end of verse 12. And he will build the temple of Yahweh. Now the first line of verse 13. Yes, it is he who will build the temple of Yahweh. Wow. Whenever God says something twice, right next to each other, wow. And I think the reason he says it twice is because he's going to build two temples. The first one is his body that died, buried, and resurrected. The second one will be the millennial temple. That's why it has that line twice, or that's what I think. And 13, yes, it is he who will build the temple of Yahweh, and he who will hear the majesty and sit and rule on his throne, so that he will be a priest on his throne, and the council of peace will be between the two offices. Notice here, we're seeing that he's going to be priest, and he's sitting on a throne. He's going to be king. Right? You know, I get these little rabbit trails and I always go down. We mentioned earlier that the Magi brought 3 gifts, right? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. In Isaiah, it talks about in the millennium, people are going to come to Jerusalem and bring gifts of gold and frankincense. But it doesn't say that they're going to bring myrrh. That's interesting. Why? Because in the millennium, Jesus will be king, and Jesus will be a priest. But he's not going to be a prophet anymore. All the prophesying's done. Now we're in the end of days. So they're not bringing myrrh to point out his prophetness. They're bringing gold and frankincense to point out that he's king and priest. That's a nice little thing that we kind of miss, because who reads Isaiah? No, we do read it. So there's the building, temple is mentioned twice. Very nice. All right. And by the way, if you remember in Ezekiel 37, this is the whole prophecy of the dry bones, which I think is a picture of the Holocaust, right? It looks like Israel is done. The Jews are finished. They've just killed 6 million of them. And, but he's going to put these bones together, right? Bone against bone and sinew, and put flesh on them. And then he's going to breathe his spirit into them. And they are going to become a great army. Interesting that it's going to become a great army. Okay, you can go back and read Ezekiel 37. I'm giving you the first half of it here. And if you're watching what's happening in Gaza, or if you have watched, I don't know when you're going to see this, Israel came back together, all those dry bones, and he brought them all back to Israel, and they have become a great army. Nobody can defeat Israel. And Israel, they'll even admit, we cannot lose one war. If Israel loses one war, there's no Israel. You understand? There is a hatred that is so intense against the Jews, they cannot afford to lose. And they don't. Maybe that's why the world doesn't like them also, because they always win. They have God's blessing. If Israel wants to stop all the persecution, maybe they should just fail at something. But they don't. They got the one true God. How cool is that? All right, so Ezekiel 37, verse 26. It says, "And I will make a covenant of peace with them, and it will be an everlasting covenant. I will establish them and multiply them, and I will set my sanctuary among them forever." There's a prophecy that there's going to be another temple coming, right? "My dwelling place will be with them. I will be their God, and they will be my people. Then the nations will know that I, Yahweh, sanctify Israel, when my sanctuary is among them forever." So that's that second temple that Yeshua is going to bring down. Okay? All right, so we've talked about both of those. He builds temples, both of them. And he sits and rules upon a throne. We know that is going to apply to Yeshua, Jesus. He's going to be the king. What is this? Ezekiel 43, 1 through 4. "Then the man brought me back to the gate that faces east, and I saw the glory of God of Israel coming from the east. His voice was like the roar of many waters, and the earth shone with his glory. And the glory of Yahweh entered the temple through the gate facing east." I think we're just showing you this to show you that this is where God's house is going to be, and he's going to dwell in it. Okay? And he fills the temple. Okay? "Then the Spirit lifted me up and brought me into the inner court, and the glory of the Lord filled the temple. While the man was standing beside me, I heard someone speaking to him from inside the temple. And he said to me, 'Son of man, this is the place of my throne, the place for the soles of my feet, and I will dwell among the Israelites forever. The house of Israel will never again defile my holy name, neither they nor their kings by their prostitution and by the funeral offerings for their kings at their deaths.'" So God's making it clear, I'm going to bring them back. I'm going to build my house where I said I'm going to build my house. Unfortunately, there's some real estate up there right now that will have to be removed, I think. We'll see how that pans out. Kind of fun to watch, isn't it? It's fun to know the future, and only God knows the future, but he tells us what it is. I like it. Okay, back to Zechariah 6. Did we cover everything in those verses? I think so. Hebrews 8:1. Now this is the main point of the things we are saying. We have such a high priest who is seated at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens. Again, pointing out the high priest and thrones. Okay, now let's go to Zechariah 4, starting in verse 1. Because this is now going to talk, by the way, what we just talked about now is just showing you all the stuff that Zechariah has prophesied. So he's got a pretty good track record at prophesying. In chapter 4, verse 1, it says, "Then the angel who was speaking with me returned and woke me, as a man is awakened from his sleep. 'What do you see?' he asked. 'I see a solid gold lampstand,' I replied, 'with a bowl at the top, and 7 lamps on it, with 7 spouts to the lamps.'" So that's the picture there. We've got a menorah, there's a bowl on top, and in that bowl there's 7 little pipes that lead down, feeding oil to the flames. Okay? It says there are also 2 olive trees beside it. Okay, so let's put some olive trees. Thank you, Mr. Van Gogh. So that's the picture, that's the vision he's seeing, and he wants to know, what am I looking at here? And by the way, when he says there are also 2 olive trees beside it, that is now going to tie in Zechariah's prophecy with Revelation 11. These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands that stand before the Lord of all the earth. Got it? So we're seeing a parallel here between these 2. Back to Zechariah, chapter 4, verse 3. There are also 2 olive trees beside it, one on the right side of the bowl and the other on its left. Verse 4. What are these, my Lord? I asked the angel who was speaking with me. Do you not know what they are? Replied the angel. No, my Lord, I answered. He said to me, this is the word of Yahweh to Zerubbabel. Okay, Zerubbabel, there's a new name. How's he going to work into this? Because we had Joshua mentioned earlier, the high priest. Now here's Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel was the king at the time, okay, or the leader here of those brought back from captivity. His name, Zerubbabel, you can hear Babel in there, right? And Zerah, I think that the Zerah part is coming from Zerah, is a sowing or a seed or an offspring. Okay, so he's an offspring or a descendant from Babel. He came back when the Jews returned. And he was the one who was appointed to rebuild the temple. Okay, you need one guy to build it, and then you have Joshua the priest who will serve as the high priest. So let's look at chapter 4, Zechariah, verse 6. So he said to me, this is the word of Yahweh to Zerubbabel. Not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit, says the Yahweh of hosts. What are you, O great mountain? Before Zerubbabel you will become a plain. Then he will bring forth the capstone, accompanied by shouts of grace, grace to it. Then the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, the hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house, and his hands will complete it. Then you will know that the Yahweh of hosts has sent me to you. For who has despised the day of small things? But these 7 eyes of Yahweh, which scan the whole earth, will rejoice when they see the plumb line in the hand of Zerubbabel. All right, what is it saying here? It's just letting you know. It's kind of poetic, so you got to read it and think and read it and think. But it's letting you know that nothing is going to stop Zerubbabel. You great mountain, you will become a plain in front of Zerubbabel, because he's going to end up bringing the capstone, the top piece of the new temple. Okay, and there's nothing going to stop him. What does it say in the hand of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house, and his hands will complete it. This is the second temple. The first temple got destroyed by Babylon. Now they've come back from captivity, and they're going to build a second temple. That second temple is the one that we see Yeshua Jesus going into in the New Testament. Okay? Then I asked the angel, what are these 2 olive trees on the right and the left of the lampstand? And I questioned him further. What are these 2 olive branches beside the 2 gold pipes from which the golden oil pours? All right, you see this picture? We've got 2 olive trees. Between, we have a menorah with a bowl on top with 7 little pipes leading to the menorah branches. But then we have 2 pipes that are coming from the trees into the bowl. What is that? Well, here it is. Do you not know what these are? He inquired. No, my Lord, I replied. Then I asked the angel, what are these 2 olive trees on the right and the left of the lampstand? So he said, these are the 2 anointed ones who are standing beside the Lord of all the earth. Okay, you know, we have an old covenant. The old covenant Moses brought down on tablets, right? But in Jeremiah 31:31, it says, behold, I'm going to bring you a new covenant a Brit Hadashah, Jewish people, my Jewish friends, my Jewish brothers. I know you won't even touch a New Testament, a Brit Hadashah. But Jeremiah 31:31 says, I'm going to send you a Brit Hadashah. That's the word he uses. A new covenant, a New Testament. So you really should look at it, because that's where you're going to learn all about Yeshua, and you will see that he's fulfilling all the prophecies that you're looking for in your Messiah. So you have an old covenant with Moses, and you have a new covenant with Yeshua. In the old covenant, you had priests who every day would have to go in and add oil to the lamps, right? And keep the lamp burning. That's the light in the menorah, in the temple. Okay? In the new covenant, oil is going to flow perpetually through anointed ones. That's those two trees. We are the anointed ones. Here, they're going to be talking about two specific anointed ones, right? The two witnesses that are in Revelation. And what comes out of their mouth and what comes out of their actions, and what comes out of our mouth and our actions, that's what produces the oil that continually flows into the bowl. The bowl then scatters it into 7 branches and keeps the flames lit in the light of the world. It's a difference than having priests go in every day and every day and every day working, right? Jesus is the high priest. He doesn't have to go in every day and keep refilling it. The Jesus in us oozes out and produces this oil, right? That's going to keep the menorah burning. Oh, and you know what? In the temple, do you remember the furniture in the temple? There's the menorah on the left, on the right was the table of showbread, straight ahead was the altar of incense, then there was the veil, and behind the veil was the Ark of the Covenant and the mercy seat, right? You know that, and only the high priest could go back behind the veil once a year on Yom Kippur. But in the front part, you have to change the bread, you have to add oil to the lamps. There was no chairs. The priest can't go in there and have a seat and, I've been working, changing this bread and adding oil, and I need to sit down and take. No. You know why there's no chairs? Because the earthly priest, his job is never done. Because he's always having to sacrifice, because we humans are sinful beasts, and we're always sinning, right? But when Yeshua, when he finished his work on the cross, what happened? He rose from the dead, rose from the dead, and then it says he sat down at the right hand of God. He sat down because the last thing he said was, "It is finished." There's nothing else, no more work to do to cover our sins. That's a nice picture that we sometimes overlook. All right. Okay, now this Zechariah, the whole book of Zechariah, by the way, we've talked about chiastic structures, and I'm going to leave this for you to go investigate, but you can see that the book of Zechariah has a chiastic structure, okay? And there's A, B, C, D, and then D, C, B, A, and each A parallels an A, and B parallels a B. And the two in the center, in chapter 3, we have the restoration of the priestly line, that's Joshua's line. And then in D1, we have the restoration of the royal line, that's the kingly line. And that's Zerubbabel. So Joshua is restoration of the priestly line, Zerubbabel, restoration of the royal kingly line. Okay? So these two guys, they're the ones responsible now for rebuilding the temple. And these are kind of the two witnesses in Zechariah's time. Zechariah 4:14, so he said, these are the two anointed ones who were standing beside the Lord of all the earth. And who's he talking about? Who's he talking about? In the Old Covenant, I think he's talking about Joshua and Zerubbabel. But if you apply it to the New Covenant, Revelation 11:4, these are the two olive trees and the two lampstands that stand before the Lord of all the earth. That's Elijah and Moses. Okay? And remember, Elijah represents the prophets, Moses represents the law. There they are. And of course, Yeshua is the light of the world. Nice picture. Okay? By the way, up on top of the Temple Mount, there's an olive grove. I took these pictures when I was there. You can see olive trees. It's kind of sad. If you've been up there, you know, there's also piles of rubble. There's people having a picnic over here. Some kids are playing soccer. They're not treating it like what it is, where God Almighty wants His home. You understand? The Muslims don't really treat it very nice up there. All right. So there's the two olive trees. And we said Jesus is the light of the world. He's also the way, the truth, and the life. Okay. You know what? He's the light of the world. What's the light of the world? That's a menorah, the light, right? And He claims to be the truth. I am the way, the truth, and the life. So, Yeshua is the candlestick of truth. I can agree with that because He said He was the light and He said He was the truth, right? So let's look at Exodus 20, verse 11. This is really cool. This says, "For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and the earth, the sea and everything that is in them. He rested on the seventh day. For that reason the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy." So we have a verse here referring to Sabbath, which is seventh, right? And we have a menorah. A menorah has 7 branches. All right. Look at this verse. I'm going to start in this letter Mem. I have it in red, encircled. And I'm going to change it to, that's a final Mem. I'm going to change it to the normal Mem, regular Mem. It doesn't matter, it's still Mem. And then I'm going to skip -5, which means I'm going to go backwards, -5. And when I do, I get a noon. And when I go back another 5, I get a resh. And another 5, I get a tav. And that is a Hebrew word. It's menorot. Well, that's just the plural of menorah. Menorah is a feminine word. And how do you pluralize feminine words? By putting a tav on the end. So, menorot. There's the menorah. And that's kind of cool. It's hidden every 5 letters. Let's keep going. Go back 5. Oh, by the way, menorah is the candlestick, right? And with the 7 branches. And we're talking about a verse here with Sabbath. And if we go back 5 more, we get the letter Hey. All right. Remember what Hey does in front of a word? Hey, if it's oftentimes is the word the. We'll see that in a minute. Then you have an Aleph. Go back 5 more, a Mem. 5 more, you have a Tav. Let's look at that. Again, I said the Hey is the. And then what's the next 3 letters? Aleph, Mem, Tav. What does that spell? Emet. Which is truth. So he actually has here, hidden in his verse, every 5 letters. And remember what 5 represents in the Bible. 5 is hey, a revelation, something big is going to be revealed. And he's revealing in here the candlestick of truth. The menorah ha-emet. I love it. Is that a coincidence? No, it's a God incidence. He's got them all through the Bible. Okay? The candlestick of truth. How nice is that hidden there? Okay? And Yeshua is the candlestick of truth. And I showed you, I'll put this, I don't have the slide here, but I'm going to grab it and stick it in the editing. But what does the menorah represent? You can see these 7 flames. Now, look, as they creep up, it's Yeshua. How cool is that? Okay. So here is Zechariah 4. I encourage you to go read that and compare it with Revelation 11 and see the parallels, because that's what he's prophesying. That's what Revelation 11. Remember I told you everywhere in the Bible it's mentioned twice. Something is, whatever's here, it's going to be somewhere else. It reinforces it. Okay, and backs it up. So, okay, well there's the end of Zechariah. Thanks for watching. To God be the honor, to God be the glory, to God be the praise, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Wait! We have a bonus! You're going to love this bonus. It is the coolest. Okay? We talked about the possible identities of the 2 witnesses in Zechariah video part 1, right? And we said it can't be 2 strangers, because here he says nothing is concealed that will not be revealed, or nothing is hidden that will not be known. So he promises to let us know it. We just have to research. And we researched, and we showed you in part 1 that we really do think, or I really do think, it's Moses and Elijah. Okay, but I want to show you some real evidence that it's Moses and Elijah. Here, Zechariah 4, this is what we read. For who is despised the day of small things? But these 7 eyes of the Lord, which scan the whole world, will rejoice when they see the plumb line in the hand of Zerubbabel. Remember, the plumb line is to keep things straight, right? And we read this. I'm not going to read it again, but here's verses 10 through 14 of Zechariah. I'd like to look at it in the Hebrew. So there it is. There's in the Hebrew. I took out the spaces between the words, and I put 67 letters across. Got it? So letters are lining up on top of each other. Why did I choose 67? I don't know. I didn't choose it. Somebody else found this and I stole it. And I recreated it. The rabbis find all kind of stuff. If it's Yeshua related, they kind of ignore it. But they've got supercomputers that are looking for this stuff. I think 67 mainly because Proverbs 23:23 says, "Buy the truth and do not sell it. Also wisdom and instruction and understanding." Look, there's truth, emet. Wisdom is chakma, and understanding is binah. If I put the gematria in, wisdom is 73, and understanding is 67. So you want to understand who the 2 witnesses are? Let's take Zechariah 4:10 through chapter 5, verse 9, and let's apply 67. Maybe we can get some understanding out of this. Okay, I'm going to start up here. Here's a red bet. You see it? What does a bet do in front of a word? Well, I think back to Bereshit. Remember, the first word of the Bible is Reshit, and it has a prefix in front of it. Bereshit. In or on the beginning. Okay? So, that be could be a prefix. What's next? I'm going to jump ahead 67, and I get a letter Hey. And if I go 67 more, I get a Resh. That's cool because that's Bahar. What is Bahar? Har, I told you earlier with Armageddon. Har means mountain. Okay? So here it's saying on the mountain. Okay, time for a little sippage. Today we have Bichnia, cherry juice. Okay. And you realize why we're doing every 67 letters, right? Because if I put 67 across and we move 67, they're going to line up. And that's why we're doing that. So there we have on the mountain. 67 more letters, we get a Hey. All right, and 67 more, you get a mem, and that is the Hebrew word. Hem means they are. So on the mountain they are. Let's go 67 more. There's a lamed. 67 more, yod. 67 more, dalet. That's leod. Leod means next to. Oh, on the mountain they are next to. Remember, we're talking about the two witnesses Zechariah prophesied about. And he may have given us the answer every 67 letters apart. How cool is this? Next we get a yod. Next we get a shin. Next we get a vav. On the mountain there next to Yeshua. It's Yeshua. It's Yahshua, Jesus. He's telling us who these two witnesses are. So who was on the mountain next to Jesus? Well, let's have a look and see. I remember in Exodus 34:28, it says, "So he, Moses, was there with the Lord for 40 days and 40 nights. He did not eat bread or drink water, and he wrote on the tablets the word of the covenant, the 10 Commandments." That's up on Mount Sinai. We know Moses was on the mountain with Yeshua. And wait, is he with Yeshua? It says here he was with Yud He Vav He, the Lord. Remember, Yud He Vav He, Yud is hand. He is a revelation. Vav is a nail. He is a revelation. The hand reveals, the nail reveals. Who's that? When it talks about Yahweh, Yud He Vav He, it's referring to the hand reveals, the nail reveals. That's Jesus. Okay? How cool is that? So Moses was up on Sinai with Yeshua. And in 1 Kings 19:8, we have, "So he, Elijah, arose and ate and drank, and he journeyed in the strength of that food for 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mountain of God." Elijah also was up on a mountain with God. Remember, he was standing there and there was a fire, and then there was a wind, and then there was an earthquake, and each one he thought was God, but it wasn't God. And then there was a whisper. And that was the Lord. Okay? So Elijah and Moses were up on mountains with Yeshua Jesus. And Sinai, by the way, and Horeb are the same mountain. Okay? Just in the Bible, it refers to them by different names, but it's the same mountain. And in the New Testament, we have a mountain, and this was the Mount of Transfiguration. Mark 9, starting verse 2. "After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, and led them up on a high mountain by themselves. There he was transfigured before them. And Eliyahu, for my Jewish friends, Eliyahu and Moshe appeared before them, talking with Yeshua. Peter said to Yeshua, 'Rabbi, is it good for us to be here? Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moshe, and one for Eliyahu.'" So we've got Moses and Elijah on a mountain with Yeshua. So I think this is a huge hint as to who the two witnesses are going to be. And by the way, when Peter says to Jesus, "Let us put up 3 shelters," you know what he's talking about here? It's 3 sukkahs, Sukkot. It's they have a whole holiday. The Jews have a whole holiday of Sukkot where they build a little temporary shelter to live in. That's what Peter is suggesting. Hey, let me build 3 tabernacles, 3 Sukkot for you and Moses and Elijah. Okay? Very nice. Up on the Mount of Transfiguration. So that's who I believe, and I believe this is really strong evidence that it's Moses and Elijah are the 2 witnesses. All right, there's your bonus. Again, thanks for watching. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Wait! We have leftover bonuses, and we're going to show you those. By the way, that last one, wow. It's Moses. I mean, that should hit you like a ton of bricks. Okay. All right, bonus number 2. Remember, Yud He Vav He, Yahweh, okay? And Revelation 11:3. Oh, by the way, Yahweh, if you put in the numbers 10, 5, 6, and 5, Yahweh adds up to 26. Just keep that in mind. 26 shows up a lot. Revelation 11:3, and I will grant authority to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. All right, so what's that all about? 1,260 days. You know what? Because Yahweh's name adds up to 26, I would like to see 26 witnesses of Yahweh. And there are. If you start with Adam and go through the genealogy till you get to Moses, there's exactly 26 people. And let me tell you, each one of them was a witness to God. Now, what I'm going to do is put in the ages that each one lived. Okay? Adam lived 930. Seth, 912. You can check them all. They're all in the Bible. Moses was the last. He lived 120. Amram, 137. Look, Levi was 137. Remember, that's one of those magic numbers, or not, one of those divine numbers. There's no magic involved. It's divine number 137. So if I take all of their ages and add them together, I get 12,600 years for my 26 witnesses. And what do we know about the 2 witnesses? They're going to be 1,260, so it's 1/10 of the first 26 witnesses. Make sense? The 26 witnesses are 10 times the length that Moses and Elijah will be prophesying on the Temple Mount, irritating Antichrist. So, more than 10 times, because one's years and one's days. But you get it. It's the number shows up the same. And I just think that's cool. We use that as a silent bonus in part 1. And if you didn't get it, we're explaining it to you here now. All right. There it is. God bless. Happy Thanksgiving. Bye-bye.